I am on a quest to beat every game for the Nintendo Gamecube. Every single one. However, each game is chosen at random by this horrendous wheel, so we are never certain what's coming next. My name is Rami, and this is my quest to beat the entire Gamecube library. Game number 11 is Zoids Versus. Released in 2002, it was developed by Zoids and published by Toonami Corporation. This is our second Japan exclusive game in the challenge, and luckily for us, the majority of the menus are in English. I'd not heard of the Zoids franchise before this, but a bunch of people in chat told me that it had a cartoon series on Cartoon Network, and there was some serious nostalgia in the air. How did I enjoy my first foray into the series? Let's find out. We start out with a pretty awesome looking pre-rendered cutscene of some Zoids battling. Sadly, the gameplay isn't going to look quite this good. There's very few modes on offer here, we're only interested in mission mode. It has two separate campaigns to play through, Rebels or Empire. I'll need to complete both, so we locked in the Rebels. The story is conveyed through dialogue-heavy cutscenes, and it's entirely in Japanese. It mostly amounts to characters yelling at each other and introducing new Zoids. Long story short, the Republic and the Empire are at war, but the secret enemy are called Terrorgeist. I won't be covering much here, but I have left a fully translated script in the description if you want to give it a look. Conveniently, all of the menus and equipment names though are in English, so I had no trouble working out how to load out my Zoids. Mission briefs, on the other hand, are entirely in Japanese. Now this isn't much of a problem, since nearly every mission is just kill the thing. There was, however, one time where this was a big issue, and we'll touch on that more later. The gameplay is not unlike Armored Core. We can choose a Zoid from the ones that we have unlocked, and they'll have unique stats, movement, and slots for equipment. There's a bunch of weapon unlocks as the game progresses, all with unique ranges, firing patterns, and power levels. We can also equip utility like boosters, shields, and extra parts that provide stat boosts like offense, defense, and radar modifications. Most importantly of all though, you can change the color of your Zoid to optimize your coolness factor, which is a big plus. For the first mission, I could choose between a turtle or a chicken Zoid, and obviously I had to send in the big cock. I went for the Smasher melee weapon, a rifle, and a missile launcher, and it was time to fight. Straight away I noticed how floaty the controls feel. Movement and jumping have little weight to them, and it's really hard to steer. Our first opponent was a big dinosaur looking lad, and he was considerably more tanky than my punching poultry machine. I figured as a melee attacker that most of my damage would come from getting up close and personal. Huge mistake. I quickly got chomped by the Rex, and my minuscule health bar got chunked. I tried switching to long distance with my speed, but I lost sight of him and he teleported behind me. Nothing personal, kid. So yeah, not an auspicious start. Having learnt my lesson, I switched to Turtle Man instead. Changing character only affects voice lines during combat, so I just switched up here and there. Now I expected this Zoid to be slow, but it was shockingly nimble. It can also turn on a dime. This time I did the sensible thing and kept some cover between us while demolishing him with missiles. Anytime he got close, I could spin around and leg it with my booster. Needless to say, this was a significantly more effective strategy than melee, and it didn't take long to lock in our first dub. I won't be detailing these, but every mission unlocks an array of new gadgets, gizmos, and Zoids to play around with, so there's always new things to try, which is really nice. Now, as much as I love the Turtle Boy, I just unlocked a giant Fenrir robot. Look at this thing! Needless to say, we made the switch in a heartbeat. Every Zoid is nicely unique, including the number of weapon and equipment slots they have access to. Wolfie here could only use one weapon at a time, so I stuck with the default rifle. This is, without question, the best part of the game, trying all the different Zoids, weapons, and equipment, and finding your favourite combos. For example, this rifle sucks. Aiming is super finicky, with some weapons offering tracking, others being purely manual, and the height of your Zoid playing a really big role in the arc and range of your weapons. Against these little slug bots, my rifle was just too long range to be useful. Again, melee's kinda garbage in this game, so I found myself quickly defeated. I'm sorry, Turtle, you truly are the best boy after all. Forget wolves, my guy, it's turtle time. A huge moan I have for this game is the lack of clarity on weapon range. You can go from shredding fools to missing within just a few millimeters of movement. The game provides no information on effective range, and I wish they'd done something sensible like have the reticle change color. It took me all of 2 missions to deduce that missiles are the way. You can manipulate their trajectory by moving around, and they home much more than any other weapon I tried. With melee being near useless, and most guns being garbage, missiles were my new best friend. A few volleys later, and all 3 slugbots were salted. This time I learned my lesson, and I decided I would stick with my Turtle Boy until I reached the mission that he could not beat. You've probably noticed by now how bland this game looks. Nearly every level is some combination of brown, grey, and beige. This leads to a super uninteresting environment. It also doesn't help that the maps are friggin' huge. It can take a seriously long time to find the enemy Zoids, and they have a real propensity just to run away from you. Audio design is also a little underwhelming, weapons don't sound very meaty, and the soundtrack's just a bit generic. It's all fine, but there was potential to do so much more here, and I can only hope that the 2 sequels address some of these complaints. Eventually in Mission 6, I finally reached the limit for the Turtle Zoid. Every Zoid has a hit point, defense, and speed value shown when you pick them. Not all Zoids are made equal, however. As you reach high level missions, the Zoids you unlock have higher stat totals. The chunky dino lad that we fought on Mission 6 has extendo arms for melee, which is pretty cute, and this attack just destroyed the turtle in no time. With this much more advanced chicken though, I was sitting pretty. It even has the ability to enter a stationary turret mode to increase damage output and range. Very nice. The Zoids themselves are honestly all really cool, and I can imagine the Cartoon Network show was a good time since it didn't involve these horrendous controls. Speaking of cool Zoids, look at this unit. As soon as I saw this big boy, I knew I had to send him in. Holy, he's a beast. His missile volleys were so big it actually made the game lag at times. He might be a little bit too big, honestly. A lot of my attacks would just fly over the enemies unless I was miles away from them. Not gonna lie, the opponent had a giant mecha scorpion, and I was a little envious. It even shoots a giant laser out of its tail. Where's my laser-tailed scorpot? This mission kind of marked the turning point for enemy bullet sponginess. A lot of the enemy Zoids are just so much tankier than I was, and it was kind of ridiculous how many missiles I had to put into them to take them down. They also have much more powerful melee attacks than the player does, and they can do fancy jumping maneuvers that I seemed unable to pull off. It felt pretty unfair. It was time to fight fire with fire. I put every single missile I could onto the juiced up chicken to make Mega Chicken.
Prepare yourself, Susan, to face the wrath of Mega Ultra Chicken!
You could see what I mean about tanky though. This mission is a 3 versus 1, and even the wolf guards that this scorpion has are tankier than me. I just had to be cheap and work with my speed and maneuverability to keep the enemy at a consistent distance, while my missiles would do maximum damage. Anytime they got close, I could use my boosters to go Turbo Chicken and cheese it away to safety. This fight was so drawn out that I even ran out of missiles right at the end. Thankfully I had my Bastion turret form as a backup to finally take this behemoth of a Zoid down. By now I've covered pretty much everything that this game has to offer. The gameplay is not especially fun or visceral, and it's just so visually drab that I was already pretty bored at only 45 minutes in. I won't be detailing every mission or doing a play-by-play for this one, it's just honestly not compelling enough. I'll mostly be giving you the highlights from here. Mission 10 included one of the very few night stages, and thank God that there's only a handful of these in the game. Visibility on these is low, and the radar does a very poor job of conveying distance. On the plus side, I had a new toy to play with, a gun called the Wild Weasel unit. On a short Zoid like the Turbo Chicken, this multi-volley laser weapon did insane work. I was just cutting through all the enemy wolf Zoids like butter, and this was the first time in several missions where I felt like I was actually doing damage.
Nice.
Now I entered Mission 12 at just over an hour of playtime. I was feeling pretty good at this point. I thought I might have this game beaten in just a couple of hours. Unfortunately, this is where things took a bit of a wrong turn. This mission just came out of nowhere and kicked my ass 6 ways to Sunday. Not only are we fighting 2 giant Pantherzoids that have more HP than that Scorpion did from earlier, but the head honcho is a giant gorilla with a mounted cannon, and my man has nearly 10,000 HP with the craziest armor we'd seen so far. Winston here seemed basically indestructible. I did, however, for the first time discover how to use my super attack, which missed. When you take enough damage, the X meter lights up, and this enables a unique super attack per Zoid. The bull guy, for example, does an insane missile volley that just blankets the entire surrounding area. Honestly, most of these are pretty underwhelming, but a neat little extra thing to make each Zoid worth checking out. But yeah, this was essentially my life for the best part of an hour, fighting tooth and nail with every Zoid weapon and equipment combo I could to try and slay the unkillable ape. So yeah, it wasn't going well. Now, you know how right back at the start I mentioned that there was one time when not being able to read Japanese was an issue? Well, this was it. Every single mission before and after this one just requires killing a guy. This one, and only this one however, actually doesn't want you to kill the enemy.
What?
So all of this was for nothing. To beat this mission, you literally find and touch a crate, and it ends! Boy oh boy, do I have egg on my face. Shout out to my mod Fellshadow for finding this out, because we could have been here for a very long time. The crazy thing is that I nearly beat the gorilla multiple times, even though it's supposed to be impossible. I'm not sure what happens if you succeed. I have to imagine it just lives on 1 HP, but we'll never know. It isn't all bad though. For my troubles, I was rewarded with a massive T-Rex Zoid. And come on, tell me this thing isn't cool. Look at him, dude. He's huge. In reality though, he's sadly pretty useless. As I've mentioned many times, melee attacks are just trash in this game, and even worse is that he doesn't actually use those lugging great cannons on his back. All of his gunfire comes from his hands and just goes straight down into the floor. His super attack does seem insane, and even one-shot a dude, but it's inconsistent, and sadly this guy just looks way cooler than he is. It's not entirely his fault though. This was another level that I found insanely difficult. I actually double checked to make sure that there wasn't another stupid crate to find, because I was getting wrecked. We're fighting 3 various wolf Zoids. 2 of them are super aggressive melee specialists that have a pretty awesome looking energy blade, and there's a big red one that has a laser cannon that just obliterated my HP in seconds. No matter how cautious I was or as sneaky as I tried to be, these wolves were tough. I eventually decided if you can't beat them, join them, and I locked in a wolf of my own. I went for a short-range missile weapon, and it seriously packed a wallop. I also took advantage of the terrain to line of sight where I could, as the AI just really isn't that smart. That seems to be why the enemies are so overtuned. The AI sucks, so the only way they could pose a threat was to be obnoxiously tanky and do way more damage than the player can deal. Locking in this win felt very gratifying. The final boss is a choice between fighting the Empire or the Shadow Organization Terrorgeist, and no, not the Warhammer one. I chose to team up with the Empire, and that leads us to the final battle for the Republic playthrough. The final boss is an absolute behemoth of a Zoid. It has 10,000 HP and might have even more missiles than me, and that doesn't seem very fair. Thanks to my choice from before, we do have an Empire ally on the field. He drives a little yellow mech panther Zoid thing, and it's really handy that he's here because the boss does insane damage. If it hits you with its laser attack, you are done for. I had a tank build on my wolf and it still got annihilated. I decided to check out the final Zoid I unlocked, and holy. I mentioned missiles being the best weapon in the game, and look at this guy. We found our savior, the Mega Ultra Missile Cat. It also came with a pretty sick back cannon, and against a target this big, the lack of homing didn't even matter. The ally Cat Zoid was handy as he kept getting some solid melee hits, and he'd occasionally distract Godzilla for me. The boss has the same stomp that my T-Rex Zoid earlier used, and thankfully I managed to dodge all of these because I have to assume the damage would have been insane. I got it down to half without too much trouble thanks to Catman soaking so much damage. Sadly it proved too much and he did get taken out like the absolute hero that he is. That meant it was just Godzilla and I in a battle to the death. I started taking huge damage from that overpowered crotch laser attack and things got pretty hairy. To lock in the win, I engaged in some cheesy strats with no remorse. I found the perfect range where most of its attacks couldn't hit me and my missiles could still land if I got the angle just right. The boss is a complete snail, whereas my Zoid was a speed demon, so it was only right that I used my best attribute to its full advantage. A few thousand missiles later, and Godzilla finally fell. After 3 painstaking hours, the Republic playthrough of the story was defeated. Let's go, dude. Now thankfully, I learned a ton from these first 3 hours, and so the Empire playthrough was lightning fast by comparison. One weird thing that happened was after the credits finished and I saved the game, I got a thank you for playing screen, and the game required a reset just to get out of it. Anywho, I came back the next day, ready to finish this one off by doing the Empire playthrough. There's very little difference between the two, so we'll be flying through this time, but the Empire generally just have way cooler Zoids. I got a Sword Chicken as my very first one. This was honestly super fun, as the main way you deal damage is running around the enemy like a headless chicken, with a sword. Rather than a turtle, this time I got a little wormy lad who's honestly pretty solid. I haven't mentioned this yet, but you cannot move backwards in this game. Not a single Zoid has the ability to reverse, which is stupid as hell. So a slow character like this is honestly quite nice. It allows for more control and aiming, and you can still use your booster to zoom around the map if you need to. We also got a lugging great Triceratops, and this was just sick. Again, the Empire have way better Zoids. It made me really glad that I saved them for second. Things weren't all perfect though. I still think the game is terribly balanced, with enemies hitting way harder than the player. It's just really annoying how bad the aiming, or lack thereof, is. It feels like I'm often fighting the controls more than I am the Zoids. Get it? Yeah, there we go. Alright, please give me something better than this worm. Dude! They look so cool, and they're too big, and they like can't hit the opponent. This time I was some sort of a dinosaur on roller skates, and my enemy was a Dragon Zoid. I want a Dragon Zoid. This might be the tankiest Zoid of them all. My weapons did nothing to this dragon. It was cracked. Needless to say, Dino Skate lasted all of 10 seconds before the might of Dragozoid. There was only one thing for it: the worm. The worm and being cheap, that is. By now I wanted this game done, so I just used the building to trap the dragon. I went to town with missiles. Alright, chat, I'm absolutely fine with this personally. That is okay by me. Worm. Now, if you remember that gorilla from the crate stage earlier, he was pretty cool. Well, now it was my turn to return to monkey. I was underwhelmed at first and was even getting killed by an enemy worm, but then I tried using his super attack and sheesh, it one-shot the scorpion that gave me so much trouble on the rebel playthrough. A few stages later, I got Sword Chicken Mark II, and this time I had giant pile bunkers on its shoulder to knock the enemies over with. I definitely had a lot more fun as the Empire. The Zoids are the only good thing about this game, and they have the superior selection, no doubt. Sword Chicken carried me easily for several missions, and we were chillin'. But then we found ourselves in another one of those pesky night missions, and things got rough again. This level has a Tier X boss, and this was another one of those times where it just had more HP than God. Even my super attack did virtually nothing. My chicken may finally have met his match. After several attempts, I did manage to hug him long enough to finally drain his HP bar. Thank goodness that's over. Just kidding, the next mission has 2 of them! Classic hilarious Zoids prank. I managed to beat the first one on my first try, which is nice, but the second one was not a pleasant sight to behold. Chicken fell once again. Sad times. After a few failed attempts, Frogus in chat asked if I could jump onto the terrain to try to get longer range on my missiles, and this was a 500 IQ suggestion, but not for the reason we expected. The AI just did not know how to path when I was up there, and this allowed me to trap them both in a position where I could missile them basically for free. Thanks, Frogus. Most of the Empire from here was a straight shot. My cockbot was a ton of fun to play, so I just stuck with him, and very few of the enemies put up a real fight. Again, by now you've seen all this game has to offer, so it's about time to put this one to bed. The only stage that did give me trouble though, had me fighting a melee wolf, laser triceratops, and one of those gorillas from before, and my poor chicken was just no match. It was finally time to upgrade, and I had this awesome Spinosaurus looking bro, so I had to send him in. As we all know, missiles equals win in this game, so with my newfound tankiness and a shed load of missiles on deck, we completely destroyed those pesky Zoids. This was my final Zoid of choice. Spiny was just too powerful for any opponent to match, and his aiming arc on missiles allowed for maximum cheese. I once again agreed to team up for the final battle against Terrorgeist, so this time I would have a Republic Zoid on my team. Sadly, it's the exact same boss as the other playthrough, and that was a bit disappointing. It would have been nice to send this off with something different. Oh well. I knew from last time that driving in a wide circle and spamming missiles was a free win, and I was more than ready to say goodbye to this game.
A few moments later.
Alright, it was a hard battle. It took all my skill. Where did this strat come from? It's not a very good game. And that thing, like, 4-shots me, so I have to dodge everything it has. And that concludes Zoids Versus, a game about very cool robots battling with decidedly uncool combat mechanics. It took me 4 hours and 49 minutes to beat this one, with a good chunk of that being spent on a couple of very tedious missions. I gave this one a 7 for difficulty. A lot of the enemy Zoids felt really overtuned, and the controls just aren't responsive enough to deal with being constantly outnumbered. Enjoyability scored a 2. This today is the lowest scoring game for the challenge, and is one of the very few that I probably wouldn't recommend playing yourself unless you're a big fan of the Zoids franchise. If you made it to the end, then please enjoy a sneak peek at what I'll be playing next time. So there it is. Game 12 will be a very odd-looking Mario Party-esque game, Amazing Island. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing as they help the channel grow, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye-bye.